I say thank you in very much a non-flippant way, because when I am asked to speak about Lake Charles, whether it be by local or national media, for me, that's an opportunity to keep the story alive of what has happened to Southwest Louisiana and what's continuing to happen to us. So I am very thankful and honored to have been invited here today. The story of what's happened to us is something that I am obviously very concerned about as a mayor, because I love my community. I love my brothers and sisters in Lake Charles and Southwest Louisiana. But I also think that it's a bit of a cautionary tale for the state of Louisiana and probably thousands of other communities along the Gulf Coast, because there are millions of Americans who live closer to the Gulf of Mexico or an ocean than the citizens of Lake Charles. And what has happened to us over the last year and a half could happen to anyone. I don't think that there is some odd Mother Nature magnet or Mother Nature anger with Southwest Louisiana. And so other communities along the Gulf Coast and the East Coast should pay attention to what has happened to us. And I am hopeful that the federal government, and whether it be current members of Congress, future members of Congress, current presidential administration or future administrations, I hope that they will pay attention to what has happened to us. And if it's not made right for Southwest Louisiana, I pray that there could be some lessons learned for future generations. When we look back on the history of disaster recovery, there are chapters that stick out. And I am hopeful that somehow, some way, what we have gone through over the last year and a half is an opportunity for this country to do better. And if it's for the people of Southwest Louisiana, that would be a best case scenario. But if it's for other Americans, perhaps that is something that can come out of what we have been through. Just as a recap, 2020 was a rough year for this entire country. It was a rough year for a lot of people in this room. I, like many of you, lost friends from COVID-19, and I find myself sometimes in a sobering position of looking for a number in my cell phone and passing a name of someone that died over the last year. And I'm sure that many of you have experienced that over the last few months. So COVID-19 was a very emotional thing for our community. The national issues, and many of which are issues that were that needed to be discussed, but were no less emotional for Lake Charles as they were for other communities, were things that we all dealt with. And I remember there were moments in probably April, May of last year where I thought, as a mayor, I had reached the pinnacle of stress. I thought in April or May of 2020, there were a couple items that came up where I remember telling myself, if you can get through these couple weeks and these couple incidents, you're going to be okay. It's going to get better from here. Just remember, it's going to get better from here. And then August of 2020 happened. And August of 2020, city of Lake Charles in Southwest Louisiana was hit by Hurricane Laura. Hurricane Laura is one of the strongest hurricanes to hit mainland U.S. I believe it's the 5th strongest, tied with Hurricane Ida, 5th strongest in American history to hit mainland U.S. The 2nd strongest to hit the state of Louisiana until Ida, I think tied. And by the way, it's not a contest. They were all damaging, and every storm is different. Every storm has its own DNA. Katrina absolutely caused more damage and more lives were lost than Hurricane Laura. However, Hurricane Laura's winds, for instance, were higher than Katrina when Laura hit Lake Charles. Katrina obviously had a lot more flooding than we had from Laura. But every storm is different, has its own DNA. So Laura was absolutely devastating. Laura was really more like a 30-mile wide tornado coming through Lake Charles. 6 weeks later, Hurricane Delta, which was a Cat 2, hit Lake Charles. Even though it was a Cat 2, we actually had more flooding from Hurricane Delta than we had from Hurricane Laura. So that was a very unique situation. You as local elected officials and local residents, you almost believe, is this real? Is this happening? How can this happen? Is this a bad dream? And then a few months later, we were hit by a Winter Storm Uri. Literally, people that had replaced sheetrock 2 or 3 weeks before were now dealing with burst pipes and tearing out sheetrock for a second time and going through an insurance and FEMA process for a second or maybe third time. So that was the third federally declared natural disaster. If you count COVID, it would have been the fourth. And then in May 17th of this year, which I know affected some parts of Baton Rouge even, we experienced what the National Weather Service calls a 1,000-year flood. It was parts of the city had 18 inches of rain within a 12-hour span, and that would account for the fifth federally declared disaster that has affected Lake Charles over the course of about a year and a half, more than any other city in American history. The Weather Channel has labeled us the most weather-impacted city in America, which is not something that we want, but it's something that we have. And I actually have a few Weather Channel producers in my cell phone, and I absolutely hope that I never get a text or a call from them again. They are great people, but I never thought that I would be scared to see a call or a text from someone from the Weather Channel, and that's what it's been like in Lake Charles over the last year and a half. I think that we as a country have made very significant strides and progress in the way that we prepare for and respond in the immediate hours and days before a hurricane and in the immediate hours and days after a hurricane. I can only speak for hurricanes because that's what I've been through, and I can only speak for Southwest Louisiana. But by and large, I think when you look over the last 20 years, you can see some progress in the way we respond to the immediate hours and days before and the immediate hours and days after a hurricane. And I will start off some of these comments by saying, when Laura and Delta hit, I did not have to ask, where is FEMA? FEMA was there. I did not have to ask, where is the Louisiana National Guard? They were there. The state fire marshal was there. We as a local governing partnership, unfortunately, have been through these things many times, and I am very proud of the coordination and teamwork that happen on a local, state, and federal level. The concern today is the long-term recovery and what has happened and what has not happened for Southwest Louisiana. Supplemental disaster aid is more of the informal terminology. CDBG-DR, Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery, is more of the formal term. And these are dollars that very customarily will come in the aftermath of a singular natural disaster. The implementation of these dollars, the availability of these dollars, unfortunately, is an extremely political process. And that is one aspect, I'll speak on that a little bit later, but that is one aspect that I hope one day changes for this country. And it's probably not going to help Southwest Louisiana immediately, but I hope that other communities do not go what we have gone through over the last year and a half. Supplemental disaster aid came 10 days after Hurricane Katrina. It came 98 days after Superstorm Sandy. One of the most recent examples, which is nothing to really brag about, but after Hurricane Michael hit the panhandle of Florida in 2018, the state of Florida, it took 233 days for the federal government to act and get supplemental disaster aid. Just as a recap, August of 2020 is when Hurricane Laura hit, and immediately after the hurricane, the president came to town. Everybody came to town. It felt like every federal official in the country was there, and there were lots of pats on the back from they and others saying, "Hey, man, this is a bad hurricane. What y'all went through is going to be top 10 in the history of this country. You are going to get flooded with additional aid. You know, the FEMA is going to be here, but don't worry. There's going to be dollars for economic revitalization. There's going to be dollars for infrastructure." Lots of pats on the back, lots of verbal offers of support. And those offers of support were there in the immediate days after Laura. And then days turned into weeks, and then weeks turned into months. And lo and behold, we sat 365 days post Laura, and we did, having gone through four federally declared natural disasters, more than any other city in American history. And we sat 365 days post Laura, and we had not had a penny of supplemental disaster aid. It took us, I still need to do the math, but finally the announcement from the president did come. I think it ended up being maybe about 400 days post Laura. So we have now set a record as a city of Lake Charles for the most federally declared natural disasters and the longest it took in this country's history to achieve supplemental disaster aid for a hurricane of that significance. So that's not a great track record. I will say that the FEMA experience has, for Lake Charles, and by the way, when I speak on these things, I will say the good and the bad. And I will say that FEMA has done a lot of things right for Southwest Louisiana. I'm not going to only throw stones. I'm going to mention some things that have gone right. And in the immediate aftermath, I will say again that FEMA was there. The boots on the ground were there. The employees of FEMA are wonderful people. They have some amazing, dedicated, passionate people that are working for them. So the FEMA experience has been probably, I would say, typical for Southwest Louisiana, which is not overly complimentary, but I'm not going to say that FEMA has just absolutely dropped the ball in this scenario. And when I speak about supplemental disaster aid, that's really not under the purview of FEMA. It's under the purview of Congress and the President and HUD. Those dollars flow through HUD. So where I think that this country must do a better job, and where I think that we have really failed, Southwest Louisiana, is through the politicization of long-term recovery. It took Ida, I think, 45 days to get supplemental disaster aid. 30 to 45 days after Hurricane Ida, the announcement came. And you know what? That's good. That should have happened for Southeast Louisiana. And I am sometimes conflicted lately to be talking about these things because I know where Southeast Louisiana is right now. And I know what some of those communities are going through right now, and they absolutely need the acute, immediate help. So I feel for them. And the fact that supplemental disaster aid was announced for Ida in Southeast Louisiana 30, 45 days after the event, that's the way it should be. It should not have taken us 400 days. So when I compare the two, and I know that's a dangerous thing to compare disasters, it's not to say that I am bitter against someone else receiving aid. They should have received it. They needed it. I remember how I felt in 2005 as a 20-year-old restaurant owner watching TV of what was going on in New Orleans, knowing that I love that city and I have family over there, and I would have done anything to help that community. And to see our federal government attempt to respond quickly was gratifying as a U.S. citizen. So we would have hoped in Southwest Louisiana to have some of that same passion from the people that could have made these things happen for us. And unfortunately, it took a very long time to materialize. And then when it finally did materialize, the numbers are still being sorted out. Again, it's a very dangerous thing to compare disasters, but when you look at the dollar amounts of other communities that have been awarded supplemental disaster aid for a singular natural disaster, one that is commensurate with Laura. You see communities that have received well over $1 billion, in many instances billions upon billions of dollars. You see communities that have had money for economic revitalization, communities that have had money for infrastructure repairs, communities that have had money for their local PA match. Even though FEMA does provide reimbursements, there's typically a 10 to 25% local match, which alone can be debilitating. The CDBG-DR can oftentimes be used to match that. Our expectation, the earliest estimates are that we will receive about $600 million in Globo for Laura and Delta. Now that's not the city of Lake Charles getting $600 million. That would be the state of Louisiana getting approximately $600 million for the entirety of Hurricanes Laura and Delta. So that's going to get split up 100 different ways by 100 different agencies and 100 different needs, the vast majority of which, rightfully so, should go towards housing, because housing is obviously our greatest need right now. But with that number being what it is, we are pretty confident at this point that there will be little to no money for economic revitalization. Little to no money for economic revitalization, little to no money for infrastructure from CDBG-DR, and probably not enough to cover our local PA match for the City of Lake Charles and other agencies. And we are thankful for what we received. It's better than what we had a month and a half ago, but I will always be honest with my constituency about how I feel they're being treated. And I got to tell you that number was really a punch in the gut. The unmet need assessment from State of Louisiana Office of Community Development was $3 billion. And typically you hope to get about half of that. That's kind of a win. And we got a fifth. So that's where we are today. The long-term recovery has been very long, and it's been a very rocky road. I want to say now very definitively that there is no scenario where Lake Charles will not recover. Lake Charles is going to recover. We are going to bounce back. We are bouncing back already. City Hall is going to be there in a decade. Lake Charles, our economic assets are there today, and they're going to be there in a decade. So when I talk about the needs, I'm not talking about City Hall necessarily. I'm not talking about the school board or the Calcasieu Parish Police Jury. I'm talking about the low to moderate income community, the people that were the most vulnerable before Laura, who are 10 times more vulnerable today, the people who felt marginalized by their government before Laura feel even more so today. Those are the people I'm talking about. And there are neighborhoods in Lake Charles a year later that look like Hurricane Laura just hit yesterday. And so I can definitively tell you in a decade, City Hall is going to be there. We are going to be standing, and our economic assets are bouncing back. The bigger question mark for me is, what are some of these neighborhoods going to look like? Are there still going to be blue tarps on roofs in 5 and 10 years if there's not enough money to reestablish people in healthy, sustainable housing? I have seen politics play way too much of a role in this whole process. FEMA is by and large dictated by the Stafford Act. So there's basically a document in black and white which tells FEMA what it can and cannot do. With supplemental disaster aid, it's a very political animal. It depends on your clout, your bandwidth, I suppose, is the best way to say it. And it took me a while to be willing to say this publicly, but I will say it today because we're a year post-event, and I will always be diplomatic and careful with my language because I want to use language that will help people. I don't want to use incendiary language just for the heck of it and because it makes me feel better. But we don't have the political clout and the political bandwidth in Southwest Louisiana. We don't have the numbers. And so a citizen in Southwest Louisiana that was affected by Laura and Delta has received less attention than a citizen that was affected by dozens of other hurricanes over the last 30 years. And that's just the truth of it. And it's the difficult truth to swallow. I have seen people be, and by the way, this is probably more than just the hurricanes of the last year and a half. It's been such a politically charged environment in this country. But I have seen people be more concerned about following a party line or a political dogma than they have about actually doing everything they can do to help. And that has also been a very difficult thing to see. And by the way, I am not talking about one person. I'm not talking about one party. I cast a very wide net in these comments, and I view myself as, especially in hurricane recovery for my community, as an extremely apolitical animal, because it shouldn't be political to get people help that they need. I know that sounds naive to say that, but it shouldn't be as political as it is. So Again, the city of Lake Charles, every day gets a little bit better. There will be a recovery. We are on our way to that recovery. Because of what we've gone through and the lack of a commensurate, equitable response, the road is probably going to be longer, and it's probably going to be rockier than it should be. And to people in Southwest Louisiana, I say, I'm sorry that you have had to be as stoic and have had to go through as much as you have gone through without a better response from government, and I'll just say government in general. But they have shown the grit in their veins, and I truly believe this as Louisianians, not just Southwest Louisiana. It's a double-edged sword. You know, we are a very resilient people. We're very strong people, and sometimes that equates to others thinking they'll be fine. You know, they're not crying. They'll be fine, and sometimes you have residents who are actually a little too proud to admit when they need additional help. But I'm not too proud to do that, and I'm not too bashful to say that Southwest Louisiana still does need help. And so as local leadership, we are going to pivot. We realize 365 days post-event, there may be an opportunity to get a little more money from the federal government, but we certainly are not putting all of our eggs in that basket. So we're going to do some creative things locally. We're going to be asking the state to do some creative things for us, and we're going to find a way to get through it one way or another. But again, I am honored to be here today to share a story of what's happened in Southwest Louisiana. I hope that the history books can look back on this one day after what we've gone through, and they can write a final few paragraphs of the chapter that say, because of this, these positive things happened. I think we still have the ability to do that. And at the bare minimum, if someone can look at what we've gone through and say, hey, maybe there's a better way. Maybe there's a better system to get people supplemental disaster aid. Maybe there should be a formula. You know, maybe we shouldn't just leave it up to specifically an act of Congress. Maybe that will be a win. But ladies and gentlemen, I have a moment to take some questions. But again, I thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for allowing me to be here today.
Do you feel comfortable commenting on how John Bell Edwards or Cassidy or Kennedy have helped or not helped to your situation?
Yeah, no, thank you. I know the cameras are here, by the way. That's why I said a moment ago, I will always use language that will help. And I will say that we've had a lot of people do a lot to help us. And the governor has been supportive. Our congressional delegation has been supportive. And we hear that everyone is doing everything they can. Yes, sir.
Obviously, the ability of an area to recover from a disaster is related to the dynamics of the local economy. What is the status of the ongoing construction and operation of the LNG facilities in your area?
Yeah, we have probably 3 or 4 LNG export facilities that are still awaiting FID. For those of you who don't know, Southwest Louisiana is the epicenter for LNG exports for this entire nation. We've had approximately $60 billion in economic investment over the last decade. There's 2 or 3 LNG export facilities that are still awaiting FID. We're very optimistic for at least 1 or 2 of those. And by the way, the companies that were there before Laura are coming back, every one of them. We had conversations with the major employers in Southwest Louisiana, and absolutely every one of them said, we're coming back full strength. That was a good thing to hear. It's even more gratifying to hear that other companies that were awaiting FID are still pursuing that, and we still have investment coming to Southwest Louisiana. That's why I mentioned a moment ago, you know, the economic engines that exist in Southwest Louisiana are not things you just pick up and move tomorrow. We have the 11th largest port in the nation. We have Chenault Air Park. We have $2 billion gaming resorts. The LNG export centers are multi-billion-dollar investments. So those are all coming back. Employment and the opportunity for employment is very robust in Southwest Louisiana right now, and we expect that to tick up. Thank you. Hey, how's it going?
Good, Mayor. And just kudos to Rotary for booking a mayor from another city. I think this is fascinating to hear about your experiences and leadership. To the audience who want to help, a lot of folks, churches have been participating in rebuilding efforts. Those continue. A lot of folks have given philanthropically. What do you ask of us as a community for what we can do to help you as a community?
I appreciate that, and I would reach out to our United Way in Southwest Louisiana. They have been an amazing partner for us, and they have helped coordinate a lot of volunteer events. But before I say this next statement, I want to say the people that have shown up to help, the volunteers in Southwest Louisiana, have absolutely been angels. It's been amazing to see just humans helping other humans that they don't even know. The next part I will say is, remember, everything that we have gone through has been in the middle of the greatest pandemic in 100 years. So we have not seen the typical amount of volunteers that would show up in the aftermath, because a lot of people, rightfully so, a year ago were very concerned about COVID. And so there's still multiple opportunities for volunteerism. And if this group or anyone in this room would like to connect, United Way of Southwest Louisiana is the best place to do it. Thanks, Adam.